So, Mike, you go to Bosnia during a war, you go to Vietnam post-war. You probably felt threatened in some ways throughout this 3 year period that you're in these dangerous situations. And yet, it seems, from what I understand about you, that the closest you ever actually came to death was in Cleveland, Ohio. Is this true?
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell us about this. I mean, I think it's one of the craziest stories. You were almost murdered.
Yeah. I mean, just to hear you say that way, I'm thinking, yeah, I guess I was. Um, Not almost murdered in the sense like a bullet went past my head and I ducked
Sure, sure, sure.
Right.
fate,
But
but
still.
It's better for YouTube if we were a little more bombastic. So
yeah, yeah, all right.
we're roping people in.
But there was a friar who I loved, one of my mentors, former provincial pastor that I worked for in Cleveland, doing really, really exciting, creative, fun, innovative stuff in a working class neighborhood in Cleveland. And we had a formation student with us. He was preparing for Solemn Vows, doing his internship year, stip year, whatever we called it, that year that you're living with friars before you present for Solemn Vows. And he was having a rough go of it and needed to move out of Cleveland and, perhaps eventually out of the order. Just I don't want to go down the path of what was not working, but just trust me, it was,
Sure.
like fabulously not working.
Yeah.
And finally, the directors in the process all agreed. And after the exit interview, I left for a meeting of guardians. It's, for your viewers, is the ones who are like superiors of a local house. I was a guardian of him and Father Willie too, and went to a meeting. And we got after the end of the meeting, somebody called and said, "Is there a Father Mike in the cafeteria?" And of course, all the friars, being permanent adolescents, said, "Oh, what'd you do?"
Principal.
Yeah, no, you're being called on the phone. So I go there, and a good friend of mine is on the phone, and she says, "You've got to call Cleveland. The rectory's on fire, and they can't find Father Willie."
Oh my gosh. That's not a call you ever want to get.
No.
So I just go into the dining room and just announce that, "Get me on a plane to Cleveland right now. Rector's on fire, can't find Willie. I got to get back." So, there's a very, very long version of the story, but he got back, and as it turns out, they found his body in the burnt building that was extinguished. And everybody's wondering, how did this happen? How do you die in the middle of a Saturday afternoon by fire in your office? It just seemed strange. And through the night, just really thinking, "Oh my gosh, I have nothing." Like I had a little satchel with me when I came to the meeting. I didn't even have my own habit, like St. Francis. I had to beg for a habit to wear, coming to the church on that Saturday night. And all night thinking, I have nothing. Like my room was above Father Willie's office where the fire was. So I've got nothing. I kept saying, "Oh, I have nothing. I have nothing. My life has changed. Willie's gone. My ministry has changed. Everybody I love is sad, broken, crying. I got nothing." And and we didn't know how he had died just yet. He's dead. In the morning, I go to the church to open up, and people were coming in to pray. And the first woman in, I wish I could remember her name. I really believe in angels, not out of theological conviction, but just out of experience. Sometimes you get a message from somebody, you don't remember who it was, and then there it was. And she said, "Father, how are you doing?" And I said, "Well," he said, "we're all concerned about you," she says. And I said, "Well," told her what I was thinking all night. "I have nothing. I just got nothing." And she said 3 words that changed my whole life. Like, there's BC and AD on the calendar, like this was these 3 words. This woman alone in the church, these 3 words, she said, "You have us."
Mm.
And that's when I realized, yeah, I got the people of God here. I've got friars. I've got the church. I got my family. I got my faith in Jesus Christ. I have the Lord himself. I have everything I need. And
Yeah.
Casey and Tito, I'm telling you this. I'd made my vows many years before, and been faithful. That was when I became a Franciscan.
It's amazing. I mean, that's the right thing to say, right? That's what you're supposed to say.
Right.
But it's so much easier to say the opposite. It's so much easier to stay in the "I have nothing," to focus on those things. But it's true, you had everything you needed. And it's when you have everything taken away from you and you're in the midst of a tragedy. I mean, literally, one of your brothers was dead. It's in those moments you realize what really matters and what the foundation you're resting on is.
Yeah, that's, circle back to the Bosnia story. We have each other.
Yeah.
That's what we got. Later in that day, we found out through some questioning that former brother Dan Montgomery had confessed. He shot Father Willie in his office
Oh
as
my
he was
gosh.
preparing for Mass and torched the rectory to hide his tracks. He distributed communion at the Masses that weekend.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I don't think I knew that part. I knew it was a
didn't-
former
yeah.
friar. I knew it was someone being dismissed, and a lot of burdens there. But to murder someone and then go distribute mass. I mean, very rarely have I taken Paul's admonition or whatever. You drink condemnation upon yourself. When you receive the Eucharist, but like there are some irreparable harms that you do when you say I'm with Christ and you're very much not.
I've got some.
I mean, and this is the kind of, event that I had heard whispers about, but, to hear it from you, share it with us fully. And thanks for your willingness to do that. Yeah, it's a lot of things that I didn't really want to think about, including, he shared communion afterwards. To be in communion, it's not just about being in communion with God, but with each other, and very much not with each other in that regard.
Let me tell you two Eucharistic stories related to that. Again, I'm not a pious person, but things happen that you just don't always understand, right? One of the parishioners who was very close to the friars and very active in the community said at that Mass on that Sunday, before we knew Willie had been murdered at all, it was still the morning, the autopsy report hadn't come out, we knew nothing about Dan at the time. And this parishioner went to receive communion in Dan's communion line because he felt bad for him, because Dan was the only one who was there when all this happened. And he said this, he said, Father, he'd usually receive communion on his tongue, right? He said, Father, when Brother Dan put that host on my tongue, it felt like a hot coal.
Oh my
He
gosh.
said, I wanted to spit it out, but of course I didn't because I'm Catholic. The day before he was killed, Father Willie was distributing communion to the homebound on the first Friday. And some weeks after the fire, I took our youth group through the rectory. They wanted to see it, and I thought, with companionship, they can see the burnt place. They needed to, get in touch with that because they always met there in the rectory. And I said, if you go into Father Willie's office and see something you like to keep as a memento or keepsake or something, show it to me, and I'll let you keep it. And this kid comes up and he has a small round metal canister. It's all scorched. It's all black. Everything's black, right? And there's something rattling around. He said, Father, what is this? I looked on the top. There was an etched cross on this small metal canister. It was a pyx. There was a Eucharist in that pyx that he forgot to bring to the tabernacle. Father Willie died in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament, and the burning that happened to his body happened to the Eucharist in the pyx.
Our Lord is with us, and he walks before us, he walks with us, walks behind us everywhere,
You have us.
and he suffers and died for us.
You have us.
That's right.
So later, when I found out later that Dan had confessed, and then they started looking at some of his,
I mean, were you angry? I mean, what was your first reaction when you heard that?
that he had confessed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Strangely, I felt relieved
Okay.
because we didn't know.
Right.
We didn't know what happened, we didn't know how it happened, and who did it. I mean, I'd already gone through so many layers of grief. He kept saying, how could it get worse, But I remember thinking, if this had been some knucklehead from the neighborhood who had done this, it would have been a powder keg. It would have been just uncontrollable. And I remember saying to the bishop and the mayor when we knew that Willie was killed, but not who did it. I remember there was just the three of us in the living room, holding hands, praying, and I said, God help this city. God help this city if it's somebody from off the street that just did this. But a brother killing a brother, this fratricide, where does this happen? And he wanted to kill
Cain
me.
and Abel.
We looked
Yeah.
in his journal. They had police read his journals and everything, and I was the one he was after. I just wasn't home.
Yeah, so that was kind of my implied question. You were almost murdered. I mean, it's not that the bullet went by you, but he had enough malice to want to kill you, and then killed someone else.
His rage built up, and he
Oh.
couldn't hold it anymore. I won't
So
tell
you
you. I
feel
won't tell you what
relief.
he said when he pulled the trigger, but
Yeah.
it's in his confession. And
Oh, yeah.
so Willie,
So you felt relief at first. Do you feel relief when you hear that you were the target?
by that time, I was like beyond being surprised. Like, of course, I was the target. I was not surprised at all. I was the guardian of the house. I was his supervisor. Willie took my bullet, but we both did the right thing for the order
How so?
and for the church. We did the right thing. Yeah. So then, after that, this is a whole. I mean, I should write a book about this too. But now how do we? As we're preparing. We don't know when the funeral's going to be. We don't know when we're going to get the body back. I mean, we're all over the news. It was just surreal. It's like, what is it? There's a psychological description or something. And it's sort of like you're looking at yourself from outside yourself. But then, the day after the announcement, it was on the news and everything, and a woman was in the church, lots of people in the church praying and talking, and she comes up and she says, "Oh, Father," and I didn't know who she was. She wasn't a parishioner. She says, "Father, have you forgiven Brother Dan for what he did?"
Oh, my.
I said, "No,
It's a bold question.
No.
no."
It's a
Yeah.
bold question.
The day after, you're saying?
The day after it was announced that it was him. Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
Ugh.
Yeah. And
So had you?
no.
Is that-
Yeah.
No, I had not. Oh, no. And I told her, I was honest with her. I could have finessed it, but, everybody's kind of vulnerable. You just kind of speak your truth from your heart. And I said, no, I haven't. And she got angry at me. I mean, she was really, really angry at me. She said, "You're a priest. Don't you pray the Our Father? Didn't you pray the Our Father today?"
Ooh. Oh, my gosh. Talk about another angel.
Yeah,
Another
that was
prophet in your
maybe a
midst.
different kind of angel. I don't know.
Different kind,
a
for
different
sure.
Gabriel. Yeah, Gabriel with
I
attitude.
like the first angel better.
This is Michael with his sword.
Seriously.
Yeah. I said, "Well, yeah." She said, "Well, don't you believe you're supposed to do that?" I said, "Well, yeah." And what about the prayer of Saint Francis? Don't you pray that prayer? I said, yeah, And I was angry. I didn't say anything to her like how angry I was. I was feeling like, how dare you
Right.
come into this place, and of all people, to say that to? Like, do you realize that I have a heart that is just ripped in shreds right now?
Yeah.
And this is how you come at me? I mean, I understood where she was coming from, but but guys,
But it seems to me she needed something for herself too. I mean,
Yeah.
she was looking to the priest as the sign, like we're all angry. If you can't forgive, then none of us have a chance. I don't know. I mean, reading into that, but I do think sometimes people hold us up as the holy men and women, and if we're not the example, I think people struggle with that. But as you, I think, are rightly experiencing, the right example is not to quickly forgive the moment something happens. You have to grieve. You've got to work through something. You've got to even just get the facts.
Yep.
I mean, within 24 hours, how can you possibly just say, "Oh, I'm over it"?
right?
I think I would have given you a reasonable amount of time. 5 years.
5 years.
5 years later, I would have asked, have you forgiven him yet?
Yeah, have you? Yeah.
Tito's still holding on to a grudge of a guy who threw away his cake, but
Don't-
15 years ago.
Don't
We'll get
you
to that
love
in
bringing
another
that
episode.
up? You love bringing that up.
Now that's a grudge worth holding on to, Tito. I would
right.
cling to that one.
To be fair, it wasn't my cake in the sense I was going to eat it. I made the cake.
Oh,
Yeah.
For
then
the
you're
house.
entitled to 10 years for that one.
Sure.
Oh gosh.
There's somebody.
So how did you respond to this then?
Well-
Did she open your eyes and say, "Oh my gosh, you're right," or did you're like, "No, absolutely not"? I mean, what would you do with this?
She was right. I mean, it's possible to be correct and wrong, but she was both correct and right. As a public religious, as a vowed person who committed my life to the gospel, at a certain level, she has a right to expect that I'm going to be a man of the gospel. And that's what she was looking for. And but I'm a man, I'm a human being with a broken heart committed to the
Yeah.
gospel.
Yeah.
But what I realized not long after that, that if I'm not there yet, I need to try to get there. I need to want to get there. I need to ask God to help me get there. I acknowledge I'm not there, but I know I need to get there. I don't know how to get there. I don't know what it's going to look like. I don't know what the path is like, but I know that I got to get there, and I know I can't do it on myself. I can't, and there was a guy in the parish who said once, he said, I will never forgive that man for what he did to Father Willie and to us. And he died an angry, hurt man.
You can only hope,
tough.
deathbed confession or something deep within. But there's something you said that, I'm not there yet, but I want to be. And even just
Yeah.
that desire, what is that? Is it the Thomas Merton prayer? Even if my desire to please you pleases you, even if I'm not on the right road.
Right.
Sometimes you just got to go to confession and say, I'm sorry, I'm not sorry, because there's something that I should want that I'm not quite there yet.
Right. So a long journey. I mean, it took a while, to some work. Somebody had given me, not like the next month in January sometime, a gift at Christmas time, a book written by Father Robert Schreider, who's very famous for his work for reconciliation, and he had come out with a book a couple of years before. He was one of my professors. Maybe you guys had him too. At CTU, very well known in work in reconciliation. And I started reading the book, and it was all about Bosnia and apartheid. And I'm like, I was mad. I took the book. I said, what the heck does he know what I'm going through? And I threw it on the floor next to my bed, and it stayed on that spot on the floor until
wow.
September. I didn't touch it. This guy doesn't know what I'm going. What does he know?
You don't know me.
You don't know me.
I've been there.
Yeah, send me to Bosnia. I can handle that. So anyway, so finally I took a private retreat in September. I just needed to, and I took that book and I worked it through, and I realized he was onto something, and some of the dynamics that he describes, and it's called Strategies of Reconciliation. It's available, and he walks out some of the dynamics about how to forgive. How do you do
Yeah.
this?
There's something interesting there because there are two different words there. Reconciliation, forgiveness. They're interchangeable sometimes, but they're not always the same, right?
Right.
No, they're not. He lays out a way of looking at it. He says the first step is reconciliation, where we become reconciled to a fact. Okay, we forgive people, but we're reconciled with a fact. The fact that this terrible thing happened. That I am not the same person I was before it happened, and I will not be that person again. You have to be reconciled with the fact that that is true for you now.
Reconciled with the new reality.
Reconciled with the new reality, and so that I'm just simplifying a longer process, but he said forgiveness happens as a gift. It doesn't come on your own terms. You have to do some things to prepare to receive it, but it is a grace, right, guys? We learned this in seminary.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
not something you can force.
No.
Nope.
And every gift is given on the terms of the giver when the recipient is able to receive it. And
Yeah. I think Pope Francis has talked about this a little bit in Fratelli Tutti and a couple of his other documents. Obviously, it goes back farther in our tradition, but the sense that forgiveness does not mean that I condone what you did, or that I endorse it, or that I'm okay with it, or that we can go out and have a cup of coffee, because that may never happen.
Right.
It simply means that I'm not going to let you hurt me anymore. That thing that you did, I'm going to let go of it in my heart. And I'm going to let it up to God. God's going to handle this, but I'm not going to hold that grudge. Because I think when we have resentment sometimes, I forget who said it, maybe it was Desmond Tutu or Nelson Mandela, but it's like drinking poison and hoping it kills your enemy.
Right.
It eats us from the inside out. Right. And forgiveness is about me. It's about me letting go. It's not about you.
Right.
Reconciliation is ultimately about something a little bit different. But it's just simply, I'm not going to let this hurt me anymore.
He had exactly that. He says forgiveness is something you don't will in a moment. Like, as of now, this point on this day, I forgive you or this person or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's more like you realize that the hurtful thing no longer has power over your life.
Right.
Exactly.
Exactly.
You look at your life now and you say, I hate the phrase move on because it's so shallow sounding, but I know it's meant by it. Like, I am no longer held to the power of that hurtful thing. It doesn't mean forgive and forget. He uses the phrase, you remember it in a new way. So that it doesn't have power over
Yeah,
you.
you can't unsee certain things, and why would you want to? I mean, there's a grace to that. There's something you've learned from that. You would probably not want to experience it again. But I remember Stephen Colbert saying in an interview one time that he's come to learn to love the thing that he most wished hadn't happened,
Right.
and that you see everything as a moment of encountering God and as a grace, even those sorrowful moments.
Even that.
It's like Francis Testament, what seemed bitter to me had become sweetness, it's those things that we struggle with for different reasons. We can allow them to have power over us, or we can choose to let go.
Yeah.
I think it's just a different understanding of our vow of poverty. And as you've been talking, I've realized our vows in so many ways are just opportunities for us to practice the things that we're going to have to do eventually. Eventually, we have to let things go. Practicing our vow of poverty just gets us ready for that.
Right.
And unfortunately, yours came in a huge and traumatic way. But there were so many things you had to let go of in a brief instant.
I had nothing.
Yeah.
Just I have nothing. But that nothing thing became real clear the following Easter Triduum. Let me tell you. Celebrate the Triduum next to a burned out rectory
Oh, gosh.
after that. And so
Yeah.
the question came, well, what does God do? The people who suffer often ask, well, where's God? How come God doesn't fix this? What is he doing? Is he paying any attention to us down here? And I realized, I guess I knew, maybe read an article or a spirituality book or something in this direction, but to really experience it, God is with us in our powerlessness. When what God does is he makes sure we're not alone. And that is transformative. Talk to somebody who's been in the hospital for a while. They know who visited them. One of the hardest things about being sick, like really sick, is nobody knows what I'm going through. You learn that in pastoral theology, right? Never tell somebody I know exactly what you're going through, right? You don't. And so one of the hardest things about suffering is it's like nobody knows. Nobody knows this. But Jesus does.
Yeah.
And his power is revealed in his choice to become powerless so that we're not alone. That's the power of God.